Imagine a steel skyscraper weighing 57,000 tons. Now imagine this mountain of metal racing across the water at the speed of a racing boat, 35 knots, 65 kilometers per hour. It seems impossible. It defies the laws of physics. But this monster existed. They called it the Black Dragon, the battleship USS New Jersey, a ship that was supposed to be obsolete before it was even born. Yet instead, it outlived all its enemies. It made Japanese admirals tremble with terror in '44. It scorched the jungles of Vietnam with sniper-like precision in the '60s. And when everyone thought its time had passed, it returned in the '80s, armed with nuclear missiles, to become a nightmare for the Soviet Navy. You think you know the history of World War II? Forget it. The story of this ship is a series of scandals, secret modernizations, and battles that never made the newspapers. Why was it feared more than aircraft carriers? How did it survive a typhoon? And why did the Pentagon spend millions of dollars to turn a museum piece into the deadliest machine of the Cold War? Today, we're opening the hatches. We're going down into the engine room, where temperatures reached 50 degrees Celsius. We'll show you what it feels like when a shell the weight of a car explodes over your head. Strap in, because this battleship never slowed down. To understand how this steel leviathan became a legend, we must go back to a time when the world was on fire and engineers in Philadelphia decided on a mad experiment. The year is 1938. The world is braced for catastrophe. Panic reigns in the naval headquarters of Washington. Intelligence reports, Japan is building something massive, something that violates all international treaties. The empire refused to reveal the specs of its new ships. This untied the hands of American engineers. Thus, the escalation clause was born. Weight and caliber limits were scrapped. The race was on. But designers faced a task that seemed unsolvable. They didn't just need a battleship. They needed a bodyguard for aircraft carriers. Carriers of that time could reach 33 knots. Standard battleships could barely push 21. In a real fight, this meant either the carriers had to slow down and become easy targets, or they had to leave their slow battleships behind. The Navy needed a hybrid, a ship with the power of a dreadnought and the speed of a cruiser. And here, engineers ran into geography. To get from the Atlantic to the Pacific, a ship must pass through the Panama Canal. The width of the locks is 33.5 meters. It was a needle's eye through which they had to pull an elephant. The solution was radical. If we can't grow wider, we'll grow longer. Thus, the Iowa-class project was born. The New Jersey and its sister ships became the longest battleships in history. 270 meters of steel. A thin, predatory profile. But how do you make such a behemoth move at 35 knots? The answer lay in the heart of the ship. 4 General Electric turbines. 212,000 horsepower. To give you some perspective, that's the power of a small power plant supplying a city of 100,000 people. And all of it was packed into the ship's hold. The steam pressure in the boilers was monstrous. 42 kilograms per square centimeter. The steam temperature reached 450 degrees. It wasn't just an engine, it was a controlled volcano. But raw power isn't everything. This is where the genius of hydrodynamics comes in. Engineers applied a technology that, at the time, seemed like science fiction. Look at the ship's bow below the waterline. There is a strange protrusion shaped like a bulb. This is the bulbous bow. A crazy idea, but a brilliant one. The bulb creates its own wave that moves in counterphase to the wave from the hull itself. The two waves collide and cancel each other out. Water resistance drops. The hull doesn't push the ocean in front of it, it slides through it. It was this hidden underwater growth that allowed the New Jersey to break the laws of friction and develop a speed that caused the escort destroyer's engines to overheat. December 7th, 1942. Exactly 1 year after Pearl Harbor, the New Jersey is launched. This wasn't just a launch, it was a message. 30,000 people watched as the giant hull slid into the Delaware River. It wasn't ready for battle yet. Its main guns, 9 406mm barrels, each capable of hurling a shell the weight of a car, 38 kilometers, were not yet installed. But it was already born. The crew began to arrive. Thousands of young men, many of whom had never seen the ocean. They had to master the most complex mechanism ever created by man. They learned to sleep through the roar of turbines, navigate endless corridors, and manage firepower capable of erasing islands from the face of the Earth. By 1944, the New Jersey was ready. It passed its trials, showing record speed. The captain gave the order, course for the Pacific. But none of the crew suspected that their greatest test wouldn't be a meeting with the Japanese fleet, but a meeting with a force that cannot be killed by a cannon. January 1944, the Pacific Ocean. This isn't just water, it's the largest chessboard in human history. And on this board, the rules of the game have changed forever. The old battleships, heroes of past wars, were left behind. They were too slow. They couldn't keep up with the new queens of the ocean, the fast aircraft carriers. But the New Jersey was different. It joined the legendary Task Force 58. Picture this. The horizon is filled with dozens of ships. In the center are the carriers, launching swarms of planes. And right beside them, shoulder to shoulder, goes our steel giant. It doesn't lag behind for a meter. When Admiral Mitcher ordered the fleet to turn into the wind and give full speed for aircraft takeoff, the New Jersey simply cranked up the RPM. 30 knots? Easy. 32? No problem. The crews of other ships watched with their mouths open. Seeing a mountain of armor cut through waves at that speed was surreal. Its first target was the Marshall Islands. Here, the crew heard the voice of the Black Dragon for the first time. When the main battery opens fire, it's not just a loud noise. It's a physical blow. The entire ship shifts sideways in the water from the recoil. The blast wave strips paint off the deck. Light bulbs in the cabin shatter, and the air is instantly burned away, leaving the smell of sulfur and cordite. 1-ton shells flew over the horizon, and a minute later, the land on the islands turned into a lunar landscape. Concrete bunkers that the Japanese had spent years building evaporated in seconds. But the real test of speed happened at Truk Lagoon. This was the main base of the Japanese fleet, their Pearl Harbor. American aviation created hell there, and Japanese ships tried to escape. Among them was the destroyer Kamikaze. It was fast, maneuverable, and desperate. The destroyer's captain thought he could outrun them. He was wrong. The New Jersey began the chase. It was like a grizzly bear catching a rabbit. The battleship pushed its turbines to the limit. The distance closed with every minute. The Japanese, seeing a wall of steel rushing at them, opened fire with their small guns. The shells bounced off the New Jersey's armor like peas off a tank. In response, the main battery turret spoke. The water around the destroyer boiled from the explosions. It was an execution. The Kamikaze vanished beneath the waves, torn to pieces by a direct hit. In those days, the crew felt invincible. They were on the fastest, most powerful ship of the strongest fleet in the world. They shot down Japanese planes by the dozens, creating an impenetrable dome of anti-aircraft fire over the carriers. It seemed the war could be won by technology and fury alone. They headed north, toward the Philippines, intoxicated by victory. Admiral Halsey, on board the New Jersey, was confident in his superiority. But he forgot that in the ocean, there is an enemy more terrifying than the Imperial Navy. An enemy you can't see on radar until it's too late. December 17th, 1944. Admiral William Halsey made a decision that went down in textbooks as a fatal error. The Third Fleet needed to refuel at sea. Meteorologists gave conflicting forecasts, and Halsey, from the bridge of the New Jersey, decided to bypass the storm. Instead, he led 170 ships straight into the center of a typhoon. By the morning of December 18th, the horizon had vanished. The wind increased to 160 kilometers per hour. Waves rose to the height of a 7-story building. The fleet was trapped. This was no longer a storm, but the chaotic movement of millions of tons of water. Even for a massive battleship, it was a test of survival. Inside the ship, there was an unimaginable roar. The steel hull groaned under the hammer blows of the waves. The New Jersey was tossed from side to side. The ship's bow buried itself in a wave, and water crashed onto the deck, tearing away anti-aircraft mounts, life rafts, and scout planes. But the real nightmare was happening nearby. From the battleship's bridge, officers watched the escort destroyers. Small ships disappeared in the troughs between waves, and every time, everyone held their breath. Would they reappear? The destroyers Spence, Hull, and Monaghan did not make it. Due to a lack of fuel, their tanks were half empty, and their center of gravity had shifted upward. When a massive wave hit, they simply rolled over and vanished in the foam. 300 ships and thousands of men were fighting for their lives. And then came the moment when even the crew of the unsinkable New Jersey felt a cold sweat. A giant wall of water hit the side. The battleship began to heel. 10 degrees. 20. Inside, people grabbed handrails. Furniture flew across cabins. The inclinometer needle on the bridge crept toward the red zone. 25 degrees. If the tilt exceeded the critical point, the center of gravity would shift permanently, and 57,000 tons of steel would turn keel up. In the engine room, deep below the waterline, men stared at the gauges, knowing that in the event of a capsize, there was zero chance of escape. It felt like the ship hung in that unnatural position for an eternity. It trembled, resisting the pressure of the water. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the deck began to level out. The wide hull and low center of gravity did their job. The New Jersey straightened up, shaking off tons of water. It held. When the storm subsided, the ocean was empty. 3 destroyers were gone. Nearly 800 American sailors died in that disaster. The crippled fleet limped toward the base at Ulithi Atoll. The New Jersey had lost its planes, its radars were smashed, and its superstructure was bent. But the main hull had withstood a blow that would have destroyed any other ship. Repair crews went to work immediately. Welding sparks flew day and night. Japan was losing the war, but the Empire was preparing its last, desperate response. They realized they couldn't beat the American fleet in a direct clash. So, they decided to turn their planes into guided missiles. The New Jersey was headed for Okinawa, into a rain of kamikazes. April 1945. Operation Iceberg. The Battle of Okinawa. The American fleet reached Japan's doorstep. But here, the rules of war changed completely. The Imperial Navy was practically destroyed, and the Japanese command banked on the only thing they had left: fanaticism. The sky over Okinawa turned black. These weren't ordinary raids. These were the Kikusui, the floating chrysanthemums. Hundreds of kamikaze planes. The pilots didn't need parachutes. They didn't need to return to base. Their only task was to turn themselves and their plane into one giant bomb and crash into the deck of an American ship. For the crew of the New Jersey, this meant 24-hour hell. The battleship turned into a floating volcano. Its main guns went silent for a while, giving way to anti-aircraft artillery. Look at the archival photos from that time. The ship's deck is literally bristling with barrels. 80 40mm Bofors and dozens of 20mm Oerlikons. When radar picked up an incoming wave of kamikazes, a chaos ordered into automation began. The anti-aircraft gunners worked as a single organism. Loaders fed the clips, aimers turned the wheels, and the barrels glowed red hot. There was such a density of fire in the sky that sailors called it putting on a roof. They created a solid wall of explosions in metal that no plane could physically fly through. In those days, the New Jersey protected more than just itself. It became a shield for the carriers. Its speed allowed it to change positions quickly, putting its armored side in the way of a strike intended for the more vulnerable Essex-class carriers. And it worked. Down Zeros fell into the water, hundreds of meters from the hull, exploding in giant fireballs. The ship moved through smoke and debris, continuing to fire. But Okinawa was only the beginning of the end. In the summer of '45, the New Jersey received a new order: approach the shores of Japan itself. It was an act of defiance. The battleship anchored off the cities of Mororan and Hitachi. There were no more naval targets. The target became the industrial might of the empire. The main battery came to life again. 9 barrels swung toward the shore. A salvo. Shells weighing a ton each traveled 30 kilometers and fell on steel mills, shipyards, and rail hubs. It was total, absolute dominance. The Japanese coastal artillery was silent. Their fleet lay at the bottom. The American battleship methodically, square by square, turned the enemy's military infrastructure into ruins. In August, the war ended. The signing of the surrender on board the battleship Missouri put an end to the bloodiest slaughter in history. It seemed the mission was accomplished. The world was saved. Giant battleships, built to destroy fleets, suddenly found themselves out of work. In Washington, politicians counted the money. Maintaining such a ship in peacetime cost astronomical sums. The era of battleships was declared over. The New Jersey returned home. Its ammunition was removed. Its fuel was drained. Its guns were covered. It was moved to the mothball fleet. It fell asleep. For 4 years it sat at the pier while the world changed. But the world didn't become safer. A new rift appeared on the map, and when the first shots rang out on the Korean peninsula, the admirals remembered. They had a weapon that could reach the enemy where planes could not. The world is split again. This time, the front line ran through the 38th parallel on the Korean peninsula. War had changed. There were no Japanese battleships here. Here was an enemy dug into the mountains, hidden in deep tunnels and concrete bunkers. Aviation couldn't always reach these fortifications. Bombs simply slid down the mountain slopes. The American army needed a sledgehammer, and the admirals remembered the New Jersey. The process of reactivation was like waking an ancient monster. Protective covers were stripped from the guns, anti-corrosion grease was scrubbed away, and boilers were fired up. The Dragon woke up angry and ready for work. By November 1950, it was off the coast of Korea. The geography of this war turned out to be perfect for a battleship. The Korean peninsula is rugged with mountains, and the only road suitable for supplying troops ran along the coast. The waters here are deep, allowing the New Jersey to come practically right up to the shore. It became a nightmare for North Korean logistics. Imagine, you are transporting ammunition by truck at night. It's quiet, it's dark, and suddenly, without warning, the mountain next to you turns into dust. The tactics for using the battleship changed completely. Now it was floating artillery. It could hang in one spot for days, methodically grinding down squares on the map. The main battery shells, weighing 1,200 kilograms, possessed monstrous kinetic energy. When they hit a cliff, they didn't just explode. They caused local earthquakes, collapsing tunnel ceilings and burying mountain passes under thousands of tons of rock. But the most iconic moment of this war happened in the port of Wonsan. A North Korean shore battery, hidden in the cliffs, spotted the silhouette of the huge ship. The artillerymen decided to try their luck. They opened fire. One of the shells hit the New Jersey's turret 1. For any other ship, this would have been a tragedy. But for an Iowa-class battleship, with its 43-centimeter faceplate armor, it was like being hit by a pebble. The shell ricocheted, leaving only a scratch on the paint and making the crew angry. The New Jersey's response went down in history as an example of absolute, overwhelming force. The ship's commander didn't hold back. He ordered all 3 main battery turrets to swing toward the flash of the shot. 9 guns, 9 tons of explosives and steel, a salvo. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left of the shore battery. No guns, no crews, not even the cliff they stood on. The landscape had changed forever. It was a brutal lesson. Never fire at a battleship unless you can sink it. For the next 2 years, the New Jersey hammered the coastline. Its call sign, Fireball, was known to every radio operator in the region. The psychological effect was colossal. Captured North Korean soldiers said that the sound of an incoming shell was unmistakable. It was the sound of a freight train falling from the sky. The anticipation of that sound broke the will to resist more than hunger or cold. In '53, the armistice was signed. The guns fell silent once more. The New Jersey, having done its job, was again out of work. Decommissioned again. Mothballed again. Silence again. It seemed, this time, it was forever. 15 years passed. America became bogged down in another war. A war where there were no fronts, where the enemy hid under the jungle canopy, and supersonic jets were powerless against guerrilla trails. And then someone in Washington pulled a folder from the archives labeled BB-62, Vietnam. This war was nothing like what was taught in the academies. Here, the enemy was everywhere and nowhere. American aviation faced an unexpected problem. The jungle hid anti-aircraft missiles and machine gun nests. Pilot losses were growing every day. Planes costing millions of dollars were being shot down by cheap weapons. The Marine Corps Command was desperately demanding support that couldn't be shot down. And then the Pentagon made an unprecedented decision. Only one battleship could be returned to service quickly. The New Jersey was called up again. It became the only active battleship in the world. Its appearance off the coast of Vietnam in September 1968 caused a sensation. Imagine the scene. Modern missile cruisers, packed with electronics, and among them, a giant from another era. With a wooden deck and armor as thick as a bank vault. Sailors from other ships lined the railings just to watch it pass. But this night was invulnerable. The tactics used by the New Jersey in Vietnam were unique. It worked like a 406mm sniper rifle. The ship would approach the shore and drop anchor. Artillery spotters would transmit coordinates. And then the magic of terror began. The battleship could hurl a shell 30 kilometers inland. The enemy was used to hearing the hum of planes, which gave them time to hide. But a battleship shell arrived faster than the sound of its own shot. First, the earth exploded, and only a few seconds later did the roar of the distant Salvo arrive. The Marines on the shore worshipped this ship. They even had a term, the Instant LZ. When helicopters needed to pick up the wounded or drop off troops in dense jungle, the trees made landing impossible. Calling in engineers was slow and dangerous. Instead, they called the New Jersey. One high-explosive shell would explode just above the treetops. The shockwave would shave the jungle flat over the area of a football field, instantly creating a perfect landing pad. During its 6 months of service in Vietnam, the New Jersey fired 5,688 main battery shells. That's more than it spent in all of World War II. It destroyed bunkers that could withstand aerial bombs. The Vietnamese feared it intensely. They couldn't touch it. Their artillery couldn't reach the sea. The New Jersey was an implacable god of war that punished without warning. But its main enemy became politics once again. Peace talks began in Paris. The presence of such a powerful ship was seen as an escalation of the conflict. Politicians decided the New Jersey was too effective and too expensive. In April 1969, the order came: go home. It was a shock to the crew and a gut punch to the infantry. The battleship turned and headed east, leaving behind a war that America could never win. It returned to Bremerton. Sleep again. The decade of the 70s passed in silence. Rust began to cover its great guns. It seemed the history of dreadnoughts had finally ended. But in the early 80s, a man came to power who looked at the Navy differently. Ronald Reagan wanted to restore America's status as the ruler of the seas. The 80s arrived, the era of disco and the harshest confrontation of the Cold War. In the Soviet Union, the Kirov is launched, a massive nuclear-powered rocket cruiser. Washington knew they needed an answer. President Ronald Reagan and his Navy Secretary, John Lehman, made a decision many called madness. They decided to bring all 4 Iowa-class battleships back into service. And the New Jersey was to be the first. The idea was to cross the raw power of the 40s with the high tech of the 80s, to create a hybrid capable of taking a hit from a modern missile and firing back so hard there'd be nothing left of the enemy but grease on the water. In 1981, the New Jersey was towed to the shipyards in Long Beach. This wasn't just a paint job. The ship was literally dissected. Almost all the old anti-aircraft guns were removed. In their place grew futuristic armored boxes. Inside those boxes was the reason Soviet admirals were rethinking their plans. 32 Tomahawk cruise missiles, some with nuclear warheads. Now, the New Jersey didn't need to get within 30 kilometers of the shore. It could strike a headquarters or a factory 1,500 kilometers away while sitting safely in the middle of the ocean. Next to them, 16 Harpoon anti-ship missiles were installed, specifically for hunting Soviet aircraft carriers. But the strangest part was the blend of eras. Imagine, on the bridge stand modern computers and satellite links, and one floor below, the massive mechanical computers of the 1940s are working. Masterpieces of gears and levers that still manage the main battery fire better than any electronics. For defense against enemy missiles, they installed phalanx systems, 6-barreled rapid-fire cannons that the sailors nicknamed R2-D2. This upgrade turned the New Jersey into the most protected and dangerous ship in the world. Its armor, designed to stop heavy shells, was now its trump card against anti-ship missiles. Most modern missiles were designed to punch through the thin hulls of destroyers. Against the New Jersey's armor, they would break like eggs against a brick wall. In December 1982, the battleship returned to service. Reagan personally attended the ceremony. He called the New Jersey a deterrent that could not be ignored. And it was no exaggeration. The appearance of the battleship anywhere in the world instantly changed the political landscape. A battleship battle group formed around it. The ship that was supposed to be an exhibit was once again a flagship. But new power required a demonstration. The world held its breath when the New Jersey set course for the Mediterranean. Lebanon, 1983. The situation in Beirut had turned into a bloody stalemate. American Marines were under fire from artillery in the mountains. And then, a familiar silhouette appeared on the horizon. The shores of Lebanon. The beautiful Mediterranean had turned into a boiling pot of civil war. American Marines were caught between a rock and a hard place. In October, tragedy strikes. A suicide bomber blows up the barracks in Beirut, taking the lives of 241 American servicemen. America wanted retribution. But the enemy wasn't standing in an open field. The artillery batteries were buried deep in the folds of the Lebanese mountains. And so, the New Jersey approached the shore. Its appearance was meant to be an act of intimidation. Gunboat diplomacy in its highest form. The massive silhouette of the battleship, frozen in the haze a few miles from the city, sent a clear signal to all the groups in the mountains. But on December 14, 1983, the signal stopped being just a demonstration. The battleship received orders to open fire on Syrian troop positions in the Shuf Mountains. It was the first time since the 60s that the world saw the main battery salvos in action. The scene was apocalyptic. The night sky was torn by giant orange flashes, lighting up the entire coast. However, behind the facade of this power lay a problem the Pentagon tried not to advertise. The New Jersey fired over 300 shells at the mountain positions, but the intelligence reports left the headquarters in confusion. The battleship had suddenly started missing. Shells were falling short or overshooting by several kilometers. A massive scandal broke out. The investigation revealed an unexpected detail. The powder charges used by the New Jersey had been manufactured back in World War II. Over decades of storage in different conditions, the chemical composition of the powder had changed. Charges from different batches burned at different speeds. Because of this, each successive shell left the barrel at a different muzzle velocity, making accurate fire at distant mountain targets practically impossible. This technical failure turned into a political defeat. The battleship, called in to restore order, became a symbol of excessive and ineffective force. Critics in Congress demanded the old hulls be scrapped immediately. The Navy command had to urgently change tactics and manually sort through thousands of bags of gunpowder. By early 1984, the New Jersey's fire became more accurate, but the moment was lost. The political will to continue the mission in Lebanon evaporated. American troops began their evacuation. The battleship left the shores of Beirut, leaving behind not a victory, but a sense of unfinished business. The New Jersey returned to the U.S. Its service in the 80s continued for a few more years, patrolling the oceans and participating in maneuvers. But everyone understood, this was the last dance. The Cold War was coming to an end. The Berlin Wall was about to fall, and with it, the need for giant artillery platforms was vanishing. On February 8, 1991, the final command rang out on the deck of the New Jersey. Finish all work. The turbines that had driven 57,000 tons of steel through storms and wars began to cool. The pressure in the boilers dropped to zero. In the vast halls of the engine room, where an ear-splitting roar had stood for decades, silence took over. This wasn't just a shutdown of machinery. This was the end of an entire era of naval power. The Cold War was over. The world no longer needed giants capable of erasing cities with a main battery. They were replaced by drones and stealth technology. The old Black Dragon sat at the pier, looking at the ocean with its covered guns. Its hull was covered in scars from typhoons and enemy shrapnel, but it remained the fastest battleship to ever sail those waters. Look at its record: 19 battle stars. That's more than any other battleship in U.S. Navy history. It went through World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and Lebanon. It saw the world change from propeller planes to nuclear missiles. And every time it seemed its time was up, it returned to prove that steel and will still matter. In the year 2000, the battleship made its final voyage. It was towed through the Panama Canal, the very needle's eye it was designed for, to the shores of its home state. Today, it sits in Camden, turned into a massive museum. If you ever step on its board, you will feel it. The smell of the old teak deck mixed with the scent of machine oil and the salty wind. You will walk through narrow corridors where 3,000 men once lived. You will see the main battery turrets and realize how small we humans are compared to what we are capable of creating. But the New Jersey is not just a pile of metal. It is a time capsule. Sealed within its armor are the voices of the boys of 44 who shivered from the cold in a typhoon. The gunpowder smoke of Vietnam is soaked into its deck. It stands there as a reminder of a time when a country's greatness was measured not by terabytes, but by a speed of 35 knots and the power of 9 guns. Many ask, could it return again? Technically, unlikely. Its guns are unique, its spare parts are no longer made, and the knowledge of how to operate its temperamental boilers is fading away with the last veterans. But when you stand at its bow and look into the distance, it feels like the Black Dragon isn't dead. It's just sleeping. It fulfilled its oath. It protected those it was meant to protect. It caught everyone it was meant to catch. And now, it has earned the right to silence. The fastest, the most decorated, the most fearsome. The Battleship New Jersey will remain in history not just as a ship, but as a symbol of what man is capable of in the pursuit of speed and power. The history of battleships is over, but the legend of the steel monster that ran faster than the wind will live as long as men go out to sea. If you want to watch a video about the most powerful battleship in the world, we recommend the video about the monster ship Yamato. It's already on our channel. Thank you for watching.